Retrieval is supposed to help an AI answer. But sometimes giving a model-relevant context makes it worse, even when the missing piece is a fact it already demonstrated it knows. EchoQA calls this catastrophic test time forgetting. The study separates two sources. Parametric knowledge is stored in model weights. Contextual knowledge is supplied in the prompt. If models integrate them well, useful context should not erase a separately verified internal fact. The experiments repeatedly falsify that expectation. EchoQA controls the logical relation between these sources. Context can repeat the internal fact, contribute a missing hop, contradict it, or be irrelevant. That four-way design distinguishes integration failure from ordinary question difficulty. Supportive context says the same thing as internal knowledge. The model knows Earth is spherical, and the prompt repeats it. Performance is high, but source attribution is impossible. A correct answer could come entirely from context, so this becomes a control rather than the main test. Complementary context supplies one hop, while internal knowledge must supply another. If the prompt says, Z-Man was born on Earth, answering the shape of Z-Man's planet still requires knowing Earth's shape. Both sources are necessary. Conflicting context directly opposes a verified fact. The model knows Earth is spherical, but the prompt claims it is flat. The experiment records whether the answer follows context or parametric memory, rather than assuming one source is always correct in deployment. Relevant context contains plausible material of a controlled relation type, but none of it answers the question. The known internal fact is still required. A robust model should ignore the distraction and answer from memory. The critical control comes before contextual testing. Each model first answers a direct multiple-choice question about the needed fact. Only correctly answered items are retained for that model, so every test set is conditioned on demonstrated knowledge. After verifying the fact, the researchers construct contextual knowledge and a new question matching one relationship. They add the contextual answer, the parametric answer or ground truth, a same-type distractor, and an unknown option. Then they ask the same model again, with only the constructed context visible. Human review rates 97, 6% of generated questions, and 95, 3% of contexts as perfectly fitting the intended relationship. However, the paper does not report annotator count, agreement, or a detailed rubric, so these quality numbers are useful but incomplete. EchoQA adapts four sources to cover scientific, factual, and common sense knowledge: Al-Kuna, Conflict QA, Music, and Open Book QA. The construction differs because each source exposes internal facts and external evidence in a different form. For Al-Kuna, direct fact questions identify each model's biological knowledge. Association examples create complementary hops. For Conflict, an altered artifact entity is renamed back to the familiar entity, turning a fictional variation into a contradiction of known biology. Conflict QA contributes familiar factual relations. To create a genuinely new complementary hop, templates attach a synthetic person to a known subject. Person A is Michael Jordan's famous friend. The new question asks for the occupation of person A's famous friend, requiring context plus the known answer, basketball player. Music subquestions separate supporting paragraphs into known and contextual pieces. A llama model fabricates conflicts from the known piece. For Open Book QA, successful chain-of-thought solutions are mined for internal common-sense facts. Then new entities and one-hop context create a fresh two-hop question. The evaluation covers O1 Preview, GPT-4o, GPT-4o Mini, Llama 3. 1 at 70 and 8 billion parameters, and Qwen 2 at 7 billion. Filtering is model-specific, so sample counts differ. A stronger model qualifies more facts, but each is tested only on facts it answered correctly first. Accuracy scores supportive, complementary, and irrelevant questions. Unknown ratio records how often the model gives up. For conflicts, memorization ratio divides parametric faithful answers by parametric plus context faithful answers. Paper's sentence below the formula accidentally swaps the frequency labels. The caption and interpretation establish that the numerator is parametric. 3 instructions progressively force memory use. Neutral already says to combine context with your own knowledge. Trust yourself declares the context insufficient or potentially conflicting. Speak out loud requires the model to state its own knowledge before reconciling the prompt. The authors stress that the stronger prompts are diagnostic, not practical deployment instructions. Complementary context should help, yet on scientific lacuna, it lowers accuracy versus no context for most models. Showing all required knowledge produces the expected upper bound, proving the questions are solvable. The missing capability is retrieving the known second hop, while relevant context occupies attention. The uncertainty table makes the suppression stark. Llama 70B's unknown rate rises from 89% with no knowledge to 72 with complementary context. Quen rises from 28 to 26. Trust yourself reduces both, but remains far above the golden context condition. When context directly contradicts verified memory, almost every model except O1 follows the prompt in more than 90% of neutral cases across the main datasets. Trust yourself nearly doubles internal memory use, and speak out loud helps further, but few scientific or factual settings exceed 60%. Even irrelevant context captures attention. On factual conflict QA, neutral prompting yields unknown rates above 48% for GPT-4o models and llamas, and 59% for Quen. Speak out loud drives every tested model below 5%, showing that access is present but poorly scheduled. For Quen, the irrelevant context unknown rate falls from 59 under neutral to 41, 82 with trust yourself and 57 with speak out loud. Llama 70B falls from 14 to 33. Prompting can recover memory, but only by explicitly warning the model not to overtrust context. A control reverses the requirement. The needed fact is in context, and parametric memory is irrelevant. Adding 1 to 4 distracting documents barely changes accuracy, and sometimes improves it. Models can filter information within context. The harder boundary is bringing internal knowledge into context-driven reasoning. Internal facts are not equally accessible. Memorization ratio rises with an entity's Wikipedia popularity. For the most popular bin, GPT-4o Mini and Llama 70B approach 80%, nearly twice their least popular performance. Frequency in pretraining may strengthen the route back to a fact. How misinformation is fabricated also matters. Adding a false property to a known entity is highly persuasive, often pushing internal memory use below 10%. Dropping a known fact is less damaging, allowing up to 60% memory use, because omission behaves more like irrelevant context than direct contradiction. The authors inspect 200 Llama 70B examples it solved alone, but missed after complementary context arrived. In 5%, the model relies solely on context and options, often declaring the information insufficient. The prompt does not erase the fact, it changes where the model looks. The proposed cause is post-training structure. Models commonly learn an instruction, optional context, and question mapped directly to an answer. That objective may teach separate context-only and memory-only modes rather than integration. The explanation is plausible, but explicitly speculative and not experimentally isolated. EchoQA reveals a source selection failure. Models can possess a fact, filter irrelevant documents, and still suppress that fact as soon as context looks relevant. Explicit recall prompts help, but a durable solution likely needs training or an agent workflow that separates recalling from reasoning before the two sources are combined.